Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to this very special event, which is part of the celebrations talking about the 175th anniversary of the birth of the French Spiritist philosopher Léon Denis. Today, we're going to be joined by Roberto Watanabe, who will be talking about the problem of life and destiny. Now, this event has been organised by the British Union of Spiritist Societies, BUS, and is being streamed on both the YouTube and Facebook pages of BUS, as well as in partnership with the Irish Spiritist Federation, with Kardec Radio, and of course, us here at Kardec Group. So please make sure that you give a thumbs up, a like, a share, and don't forget to follow and subscribe to these channels as well. But please remember to stick around with us until the very end, as we will have a Q&A with Roberto, as well as a few announcements from BUS. But before that, we do have an important appeal that we want to mention. Let me just bring that up. So we want to make people aware of this appeal on behalf of the British Asian Trust, the Oxygen for India Emergency Appeal. As many of you may know, the COVID pandemic is incredibly drastic right now in India, where they are facing problems of not only having multiple people to a bed, not just two people, but sometimes 3 or 4 people to a hospital bed, and people are in severe lack of oxygen for, COVID is a respiratory problem. So the British Asian Trust is collecting donations and working in partnership with a charity called Swasht in India, who are helping to get oxygen to the people who require it. And as you can see, there's roughly some quick ideas as to how the money is used. So £50 helps to provide oxygen for 40 patients who are struggling to breathe. £450 helps with a low flow oxygen concentrator to help with up to 900 patients in a hospital ward. And £830 is a high flow concentrator for up to 550 of the most seriously ill patients. This is not a fundraising campaign on behalf of BUS, it's an appeal from BUS on behalf of the British Asian Trust. Spiritism teaches us that we need to respect and help others in the same way that we want to be helped and respected. And we can't physically be there in India to help people, but we can help with monetary donations to go to a serious charity such as the British Asian Trust, who will then be helping those who can help others. So please, if you can, visit www.britishasiantrust.org and follow the links for the Oxygen for India Emergency Appeal, so that we, as a whole, as a community, can help others who need it. Thank you. So let's get back to our program for today and introduce our guest. So Roberto Watanabe is the president of the Spiritist Federation of the state of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and he has a degree in philosophy. Now, if you have any questions for Roberto, please send them in the comments section, and we will get to them later. So Roberto, hello, how are you? And what can you tell us about the problem of life and destiny?
Hello, Adam. Glad to be here with you. Thanks for the invitation. Hello, everybody. Well, today we are going to talk about the book of Léon Denis, this great Spiritist philosopher, The Problem of Life and Destiny. So in this book, Léon Denis tried to answer, or actually he answers, the question about life, about the meaning of life. This is a question that has been asked since the ancient times by all the philosophers, all the great thinkers of the past. And the meaning of life, Kardec, for example, asked in other ways. Like, for example, Kardec asked, where do I come from? Where do I go? What am I doing in this here on Earth? So these are all questions linked to that previous question, what is the meaning of life? And then that is what we are going to talk today, because Denis started his book, and in the chapter 3 of the first part, actually we are going to talk today only the first part of the book. Okay, so is the presentation okay, Adam? Hello, Adam? Well,
It's absolutely fine. There we go.
okay. Uh, so Denis, he says that the problem of life and that of the soul are one. So what he means here is that if you want to know the answer to the problem of life, you need to know also the answer to the problem of the soul. They are the same. So if we remind about the Socrates, for example, the Greek philosopher from the 6th century before Christ, he used to ask, what is the ultimate nature of a man? That means, what is the essence of a man? And his answer was, it is the soul. Soul in Greek, the word for in Greek for soul is psyche. From psyche, you derive the word psych, psychology, psychiatry. So these regarding to our mind, right? So the soul, Socrates said, is the conscious being. Is the soul gives life to our body. So Socrates used to say that the ultimate task of an educator should be to teach people how to take care of their soul. So Denis, in other words, are saying the same. You can see here. He says that the human soul is a willpower, free and sovereign. It provides man his principle of life and movement, and dominates all the being's material elements. The being's material elements means our body, right? So the soul dominates the body, or at least it should dominate, because there are people who are dominated by their body, right? By their instinct and by their passions. But the ideal situation would be soul to dominate the body. So that is why we study and practice the moral side of our life, right? So, but to know how to take care of our soul, we need to know our soul. So another thing that Socrates used to say is an expression that was inscribed in the frontispiece of the temple of the city of Delphi in Greece, which is known as the Oracle of Delphi. So in the frontispiece, there was an expression which is know thyself. So if we want to know our soul, is the same as knowing ourselves, right? So we can see also Saint Augustine, I mean the Spirit of Saint Augustine. In the Spiritist book, he also on question 919, he reminds us of the same expression that Socrates used to say there on the 6th century before Christ. So in the question 919, Kardec asked to the Spirit, right? What is the most effective means for improving ourselves in this life and for resisting the draw of evil? And then the Spirit, in this case, St. Augustine, answers, a sage of antiquity is Socrates, right? A sage of antiquity has told you, know thyself. So that is the main issue of our talking today. Okay, so let us study a little bit about our soul. But before talking about our soul, let's understand a little bit more about the structure of a man. Because the Greek, for example, they believed that men are composed of two parts, soul and body. So just two parts. And Spiritism now brings a third part, which is what we call a spiritual body. So that's what Denis is talking here when he says each time the soul, it means the soul, abandons its terrestrial body, which means our carnal body, it returns to space united to its spiritual body. So this subtle body existed always in us. So what is Denis saying here? He's saying that we, 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 we are not composed of, we're not composed of two parts only, but the three parts. We are a soul. Soul and spirit are the same, okay? So we are soul or spirits. We have our carnal body, and there is a spiritual body which serves as a link between the soul and the body. So that's what Denis is saying here. And this spiritual body always goes with us, even after death, right? So actually, when we see ourselves, we are only a soul or a spirit and our spiritual body, no matter how elevated we can go, right? So, and this spiritual body is invisible. So Denis says, although invisible, it serves as a mold for our material body. So our material body, um, since our birth or since the conception, are developed according to this spiritual body. So it's not, we cannot see at our naked eyes, right? Only the mediums can say by what we call in Spiritism the second sight, so the spiritual sight. So this is this spiritual body, and it is important because we are going to talk about it on the following slides. Okay, so and Kardec also in the Spiritist book, in the question 93, he asks to the spirits, is the spirit per se without a covering, or as some insist, is it surrounded by some kind of a substance? And the answer about the spirit is, as a fruit is surrounded by the perisperm, the spirit per se is surrounded by an envelope, which by comparison may be called the perispirit. So peri is a Greek word, which means around, right? So perispirit is around the spirit. So it means that we are intelligent principle, we say in Spiritism, and we also, in this, we are involved by this spiritual body, which is called perispirit. And this, when we incarnate, we were there in the spiritual realm with our perispirit. And when we incarnate, then since the conception, we develop our material body according to the perispirit, let's say, instruction, if we can say, okay? So that is the perispirit. And then he says, even during life, this subtle body can detach itself from the carnal body under certain conditions. So we, with our spiritual body, are not imprisoned in this material body at any time. There are some situations when we can emancipate, Kardec says, from our material body. And that usually happens when we sleep, for example. And also the mediums have this facility to detach from the material body, okay? So then he says, as such, the soul can act, appear, and manifest at a distance. So what Denis saying here is that, for example, if I'm sleeping, for example, I can detach myself from my material body, and with my spiritual body, I can travel at a distance. Our spiritual body is always connected to the material body with a kind of a cord, right? Etheric cord we see in some instance. So, and then we can manifest it at a distance in another place. So we will see some examples of that, okay? So, and then Kardec also says that the spirit is surrounded by a substance that might look vaporous to you. That means to us, incarnate people, right? But is still quite dense into us. to them, the spirits, right? So nevertheless, it's sufficiently vaporous to be able to raise itself up into the air and travel wherever it wants to go. It's just what I just said a moment ago, right? So this is the this spiritual body. So we are composed of three parts: soul or spirit, um, perispirit or spiritual body or subtle body, and then our material body. So then, but how can we prove the existence of the soul? This is the question here that Denis raises, right? So he says, according to the materialistic school, the soul is the result of a cerebral function. So the soul is just a result of our brain. And then he says, but if man were wholly contained in the physical germ, uh, that means that germ that was the beginning of our conception, and then one would find in him only the qualities and faults of his parents and his ancestors. So what he's saying here that um, if we were our body or the soul was the result of our physical body. Our physical body is derived from the DNA from our parents, for example, and for our ancestors. So we would present only the qualities that they have or they had, right? So then he said, on the contrary, one sees everywhere children who differ from their parents. So we see children that on the intellectual or moral aspects are much inferior from their parents, and also we can see examples of children who are much superior to their parents. So and heredity does not explain that. Why? Because we should have the same level of intellectual and moral aspects as our ancestors if the soul was the result of just a cerebral function. So therefore, Denis said, the theory of atavism or heredity are powerless to explain the cases of infant prodigies. For example, the most famous case of infant prodigies is Mozart, right? Because Mozart, at the age of 5, he already knew to play some instruments, composes their first musics, and although his father was a musician also, and he has much superior talents than his father. And if the soul was the result of a cerebral function, that should not happen. So, right? So that proves that the soul has an existence independent of our body. That's what Denis is saying here. And that's what spirit also says, right? So this is one proof of the existence of the soul as something independent of the body. The second proof, and these are two moral proofs that he said, right? So the second proof is the following. Denis said that the idea of right or good engraved at the bottom of our consciences are another proof of our spiritual origin. So what he's saying here that we have with us this idea of right and or good, right? Of good and evil, for example. So he says, if man was the result of the mechanical forces of the world, we could not know good and evil, or feel remorse, or moral sorrow, right? So another proof that the soul, the spirit, is independent of the material body. Kardec says the same, right? In the question 1621. So he asked the spirit, where is God's law written? So they answer, in the conscience. So, and then in the question 630, he asks, how we can distinguish between good and evil? And then the spirit answer, Good is everything that is in harmony with God's law, whereas evil is everything that deviates from it. So um, it's the same that Denis is saying, right? Because we have the God's laws in our conscience, we know what's good and what's evil, and that is independent of our material body. So that is the second proof, let's say, moral proof for the existence of the soul. And now we are going to develop the experimental proof of the existence of the soul. And then we will see many examples, right? So we have these two moral proofs, and then we have the experimental proofs. But to know that we why and then here Denis said that which always characterizes the absolute difference of a soul from matter, it means from our body, it is unity with the consciousness. So matter or our body disperses and vanishes under analysis. So go to dust, like the Bible says, right? Our body. But the spirit represents only the spirit represents the one element, simple, indivisible, imperishable, and immortal. So the soul or the spirit is immortal, right? And every spirit, every soul has its consciousness. So, and this is something that does not have an end and uh, an end, right? So just the material body has an end. So let's know a little bit more now about the soul, and then we go to the issue of a personality. And then he said that to be a person is to have a conscience, a me, right, which reflects, examines, and remembers, right. And he says there are certain cases when there appears in us a being wholly different from our normal selves. So what he's saying here that sometimes we manifest in ourselves something that is different from our normal way of being, right? So, and he says it possesses knowledge and aptitude more extensive than those of the ordinary personality, and more varied and powerful perceptions. So he's talking about something that is deep in us and that has a broad view of things, right? And he says that often the observers of this phenomena of a second personality, because he's saying that it's like we had a second personality uh, beyond our normal day-to-day personality. And so the second personality, the observers believe they are when the observers see that, they believe that they are in the presence of another individual, but actually is the same individual. So that's what Denis is saying here, that the me, ourselves, our conscience, there we have many layers, right? Because Spiritist defends that the idea of a reincarnation, right? So if we have many lives before, the memories of those past lives we can remember in this present life, but the memories are there in the depth of our conscience, and sometimes they emerge. So that's what Léon Denis is saying, right? So he gives us an example, this example of this woman, right, Felida, who was studied by this Dr. Azan, a scientist, right? So what Dr. Azan saw is that regarding Felida is that he says that almost every day, with no motive, Felida was taken by a pain in the forehead, and the head falls on her chest, right? So she seemed to be sleeping, right? And then, but after a while, she raises her head, opening the eyes, and greets the people around her, smiling. And she, in normal, let's say in the normal personality, she is a sad person. And then she greets the people smiling, as if she had arrived at the very moment. So it's not the same person that went into the sleep, into sleep, right? So her physiognomy, Denis said, sad and silent before, lights up and breathes joy. So it's a different personality. And what is interesting, Denis said, is that in this state, this state of the second personality, she remembers what happened during the previous access, because remember that this happens almost every day. She remembers, in the second personality, remember what this second personality has done in the previous days, right? And also, the second personality remember what Felida did in his normal life. So he it means that she remember, the second personality remembers what the first and the second personality did, right? So that's what Denis is saying here. But the first personality, which is the normal day-to-day personality of Felida, does not remember what the second did. So that's what he's saying here, right? Whereas during normal life, Felida has no memory of what happened during the access, or the access means when she was in the second personality stage, let's say, right? So clearly, Denis said, it's not the case for many personalities at stake, but it's simply several states of the same consciousness. So what he's saying here, because in Spiritism we say that normally a medium, for example, a spirit, a discarnated spirit, can manifest himself through the medium. So in that case, the person which is talking here or manifesting in some way is not the personality of the medium, but it's another personality of another person, right? In this case, no, it's the same person. So it's just on the different state of its consciousness. Probably, most probably, manifesting some the consciousness of some life, some previous life. So what Denis is trying to explain here, so is this existence of many layers of consciousness that we have, right? And every one of us have this. So then he said, well, above the level of the ordinary personality, there exist in us other layers of consciousness, and those layers it is registered a world of facts and memories, reaching a long past of the soul. So all our past lives, right? And during normal life, these reservoirs remain hidden. So it's in the depth of our conscience and appear only in the somnambulistic state. Somnambulistic state is like, for example, sleeping is a kind of a somnambulist, right? We'll see the other case. Well, it's here. Such a state, of a somnambulistic state explains the case of a double personality, which is the case of a Felida. So Felida manifested her second personality in this somnambulistic state, right? And clairvoyance also is explained by this somnambulistic state. Clairvoyance in this case is the vision at a distance, right? I'm here in São Paulo, and then I can see something that is happening in London, for example, right? Now, right? So this is explained by this somnambulistic state. Telepathy, which is the transmission of a thought, right, from one person to the other who are at a distance. There are at a distance also. Premonition, which is some vision of a future event, and other cases. Uh, we'll be talking about all these events today, but to study more deeply about these, to understand the mechanics of how it happens, we should study actually another another book of Léon Denis, which is Into the Unseen, right? Which means into the invisible. Invisible here means the spiritual realm, spiritual world, spiritual dimension. So, and if we study this book, then we understand more in detail all these phenomena here that was just citing here, right? So, and also these layers of consciousness explains the inspiration of genius as the emergence of ideas formed in the profound regions of the being. So it means that, for example, sometimes we have a big problem to resolve, right? So, and then we go to sleep with that problem, and then in the morning we wake up with some idea to resolve the problem. So uh, most probably during the night, our deep consciousness was working on that problem. And also we will see after today, and we also we also can talk to another spirit, right, about that problem, have some advice, and then we wake up in the morning with the idea what the resolution of the problem. So this is like the inspiration for genius, right? So it's something that happened with Einstein, for example, right? And so therefore, Denis said, ordinary superficial me seem to be only a fragment of the total me, right? So our conscience is just a small part of our total conscience. That's something that the Freud already have acknowledged, right, in their theories of unconscious, conscience, ego. So, and well, that's another issue, but it is related to here, right? So that's what Denis is saying. And then let's talk about a little bit about the somnambulistic states that Denis mentioned before. And one kind of a somnambulistic state is sleep. Right? So here Denis talk about the soul and different states of sleep, and he asked, "What is sleep?" Right? Then sleep is simply, he says, the release of the soul from the body. It's like I said before, right? When we go to sleep, um, our body needed to rest from the activities from the day, but the soul does not need the rest. So the soul can detach itself from the body, always linked by the etheric cord, and goes to what attracts the soul, right? So that's why Denis says sleep is the brother to death. It's like we die every night, right? To be reborn in the next morning. So, in the sense that death is the soul complete and definite liberation. It means that when we sleep in the next day, we wake up, right? When we die, it's like we sleep and then we don't go back, huh? At least by some time. Huh? We also come back again on the reincarnation process, but then we have another body and so on. Right? So, and then he says, when we are sleeping, often the soul goes far away and its observations and impressions are translated into dreams. So dreams are some small fragments that we have of our activities during our sleeping time. So when we as soul with our spiritual body always went to other places, talked to other people, other spirits, incarnate or discarnate. So, and then these fragments of our memories are the dreams that we have, right? And then Denis said, in such a state, an etheric cord unites the soul to the body, through which impressions are transmitted to the brain and even allows the soul to control the body. So this cord which connects the soul with the body when it's incarnated is the way which impressions are transmitted to the brain, because the soul is far away. For example, if I'm sleeping, I can go in spirit with my spiritual body to London, for example. And then what I see there, I talk to someone there, and that the impression that I have from there is transmitted to our brain in my body, which is sleeping here on my bed, and through this cord. And what I remember the next day is what we call dreams, right? So, so Kardec says the same, right? He asked in the question 401, during sleep, does the soul rest like the body? And the spirit answer, no, a spirit never remains inactive. During sleep, the bonds that join it to the body are loosened. And since the body does not need it while sleeping, The spirit travels through space. It enters into a more direct relationship with the other spirits. So when I am sleeping, I can meet, for example, my grandmother who died years before, right? Or I can meet a friend of mine which is incarnate, right? And we are suppose that we are working some problem in our day-to-day activities. And we can meet at night and continue our conversation, right? So that's what Kardec is saying here. Um, and then Denis explain here how can we explain the incoherence of most dreams? Because the memories of dreams are very fragmented images, right? That we have. It's not something clear. And then he explained here that when the soul is not fully released, the sensations of the day and memories of the past mixed with the impressions of the night. So that's why the dreams are so confusing to us, right? Because in the dreams we mixture the preoccupations that we have on our day-to-day activities, but on the this state of sleeping, we can access the memories of the past. It means the past from this life or from the previous lives, and then we have also the impression of the night. Suppose that I'm sleeping, but then there is a kind of explosion, for example, outside, right? I'm sleeping, but that impression it can have has an effect in my body, in my soul, and I can mix this with all other sensations, right? But Denis said, but in the measure that the soul frees and elevates itself, the psychical senses becomes dominant, and the dreams acquire lucidity and clearness. So, is one example of this is, for example, an example that I have done, right? When I remember in the morning after that I found my grandmother and talked to her, right? He passed away 20 years ago. And then this lucidity and clearness of what I remember clearly what I talked to her, what he said, she said to me. So this is what we call in Spiritism, we call the real dreams, right? When we find the people incarnate or discarnate, and when we remember about that in the next morning. And that is different from the day-to-day, the superficial dreams, which is these related to the sensations of the day-to-day preoccupation, right? So this is another kind of a dreams. And when we have some some vision of something of our past life, for example, that is what we call the reflective dreams, right? So basically, we have three types of dreams: superficial dreams, reflective dreams when we go to our past, and real dreams when we find the people, right, and remember about that. And during sleep, of course, the soul also apply itself to repair the vital losses caused by the day's labor on our body, right? So uh, you can see here how active we are, right? When we are sleeping. People in general believe that when we are sleeping, we do nothing, right? We do a lot of things. So that's what Léon Denis is saying here. So why is he's talking about this? Because he's trying to explain. So this is something from this experimental side. He's trying to explain the independence of the soul, right? The soul does not depend on the body. So that's what he's saying here, right? um, he also mentioned the premonitory dream. So we talked about premonition. So that is an ensemble of images bearing on future events. So he tells about an example. A magistrate, a judge, who who was killed in a car accident. So what happened is that his son, his 10-year son, had dreamed twice. And in those dreams, the son saw what would happen to his father in all details, the car accident, so that in the next morning uh, he asked his father not to go to work, and his mother also, because probably he told his mother about his dream, and she also supplicated, like Denis said, to the father, to the magistrate, that that day he would not go to work, but he, 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 he did not hear. And then he found the death under the same circumstances perceived by the child. So in this case, through the dreams and the death emancipated the state of consciousness, like Kardec says, the child perceived something that would still would happen in the future, right? So this is the premonitory dreams. Um, we also have the case of the provoked clairvoyance. So clairvoyance in this case here is the vision at a distance. Clairvoyance also we have the situation where the person clairvoyance is also a medium. A medium has a clairvoyance, right? So clairvoyance also may be an event when the medium sees through time and not through space, right? Clairvoyant at a distance is like I said, I'm here in São Paulo and sees something happening in London. And the clairvoyance in time is when I see something that happened in this last century, for example, right? So in time, right? So Denis also tells us here about an example. He said that this Dr. Maxwell, he plunged a psychic or a medium, right, in magnetic slumber, a kind of a hypnotism, right, and suggested the woman to go to one of his friends, right, the friend of the Dr. Maxwell, Dr. Maxwell, right? So the medium says that she's seeing Mr. B, who is the friend of Dr. Maxwell, and but he's partly dressed and walking barefoot on stone. So, and that was 10:30 on the night. So, what would be a man doing at 10:30 in the night, partly dressed and walking barefoot on stone outside his home, right? So then the next day, Dr. Maxwell find his friend and tell her and ask him about what the medium has seen. And his friend tells that he had not felt very well at the night before. And then following a friendly recommendation, he did exactly what the medium had seen. So this is clairvoyance, right? Because the medium was in one place with Dr. Maxwell and saw the Mr. B, Dr. Maxwell friend, on another place. So this is clairvoyance here, one example. So who did this? The soul, right? The medium's soul. So it means that she, the spirit, the medium, with her spiritual body, she, in this somnambulistic state, she detached from her material body and he went there where Mr. B was, right? And saw the event there. So that's what happened here. Another case is the telepathic projection. So telepathy, Denis said, is the projection of the thought to a distance. So I emit a thought here to Adam in London, and then he received my thought, and let's say he calls me and say, well, you said you transmitted me something, and that is exactly what I sent to him, right? So this is telepathy. And here, Denis said, the body takes no part. All of these events that does not involve the material body, but always the spiritual body, right? The soul and its spiritual body. So that's why he's saying here that the body takes no part. It's more the body, the material body, actually is more of an obstacle than an aid, right? So he give us an example of this Mr. Pierre Janet, who was a scientist, French scientist, right? So Pierre Janet called mentally Leonie, a woman, a telepathic subject, to come to him. So Leonie was 2 miles away from Pierre Janet. And by thinking, in his mind, Pierre Janet called Leonie. And then after some moments, she came to where Pierre Janet was. So it means that she received the message, right? The mental message from Pierre Janet. So that is what Denis is saying, is showing here. So transmission of thoughts operates both during sleep and individual state. In this case of Leonie was individual state, right? Because she was awakened, she received the mental message and she came to where Pierre Janet was, right? So this is telepathy. Always involving the spiritual, the soul and the spiritual body, nothing to do with the material body. All of this is from the need to prove the existence, the independent existence of the soul. And then we have also the case of the appearance of the living. So he mentioned a case of apparition in parliament. Because if, for example, if normally we are in a somnambulistic state, right? Either I am in a kind of a trance here, or I'm sleeping. And then I detach it from my body and I go to London, for example. And there I can be seen by Elsa, for example, Elsa Rossi. Should she if she is a medium and who has what we call a second sight, and then she could see me there in London, right? So this is what we call in Spiritism apparition. Right? So Denis gives us here an example. He says that the Sir Karn, who was ill at home, he was at his home and was seen by 3 other deputies in the parliament in London, right? So it was undoubtedly, then he said, his etherical double, his spirit, his spiritual body, which had been projected by his great desire to be there and cast his vote for the government. Because that day there was an important vote, something important to be decided by the government, and he should vote if he could be there. He couldn't be there because he was real, but he was in spirit, we say, with his spiritual body, and then 3 colleagues of him could see him in the parliament. This colleague, of course, most probably they didn't know, but they were medium, right? They had the second sight and saw Sir Karn there in the parliament. So that's why Denis said the manifestation at a distance between incarnate spirits leads to the possible communication of the incarnate and the discarnate. What he's saying here? Why? Well, if I can communicate myself being incarnated, it means that a dead person, discarnate, can also communicate with ourselves, right? In the same way, which happens here with the Sir Karn, right? So this is the case of appearance of a living, and then we can talk about death, right? Because if something that happens when we are incarnated may also happen when we are discarnated. So then we must ask about what is death, right? And then Denis said, death is just a change of a state, leading to another phase of existence, right? And all death is a rebirth, and rebirth for the spiritual realm, right? And when we are reborn here, we have a rebirth on the material dimension. But when we die, we have it's a kind of a rebirth in the spiritual dimension. And after a time for disturbance, we find ourselves in the fullness of our faculties, near to the beloved beings who shared our earthly existence. So, what Denis is saying here, that when after we die, we find those who departed before us, right? Well, my grandmother, for example, the mother that I mentioned, or my grandfather, my grandparent, right? And so the fashion in which we know how to die is in itself an indication of what will be our life in space. So if we live well here, we have a good life after death, right? If we don't live well here, we will not have that good life after death. So that's Denis saying here. And then uh, Kardec asked the same, right, in the Spiritist book. The question 149, he asked, what does the soul becomes after death? And the Spirit answered, it becomes a spirit again. That is, it returns to the world of the spirits that it had left for a time, because when he reincarnated, he left the spiritual world, and now he is returned, right? So does the soul preserve its individuality after death? Kardec asks, and the Spirit answers, yes, it never loses it. What would the soul be if it did not preserve its individuality? Right? So, and then Kardec, Denis says, death does not even deprive us of the things of the earth. We continue to see those we loved and left behind us. So that is very interesting, because when we are after that, we find those who departed before us, and then we still can be in contact with those who were left behind. So because love has no obstacle, right? Obstacle of death is not an obstacle to love, and that's what Denis is saying here. So until the hour of our return to flesh, which is the reincarnation, we participate etherically, that means with our perispirit or spiritual body, in the labors of those who toil, who struggle for humanity, right? So who help for humanity, help humanity. So that means that in the spiritual life, we work, we study, we do a lot of things. So we are evolving always, right? Whether in our material life, whether in our spiritual life. So that is the purpose of life, of our life, right? The meaning of life is that. So, and then we can have the manifestation after death, right? The apparition of the disease. So, in this case, Denis mentioned the case of the spirit of Kate King, a woman who was materialized during 3 years in the home of Sir William Crookes. William Crookes was a scientist who won the Nobel Prize in the two first decades of the 20th century, right? So he did some experiments, and in those experiments, this spirit of a Kate King was materialized, and as materialized, she could talk to persons around her, to incarnate person, and that in that room can touch the person. So that is something very interesting. But as I said, to understand this better, we should study the other book of Denis, which is Into the Unseen, right? So, and we have also the phenomenon of incorporation, when the spirit incorporates in the body of the medium, right? The sleeping medium, and speaks and writes, furnishing proofs of his identity. So, in this case, it's not the case like the Felida case, right? Which we saw. In this case, the personality which is manifesting here is totally different from the medium's personality. So it's another person, another spirit, right? So that's the phenomenon of incorporation. And Denis said that voice, language, and the gestures are those of the spirit and not of the medium. And these phenomena are analogous to that of the second personality. That means this Felida case, but of the sleeping medium, but it's not the same, right? In this case, it's another spirit that is manifesting himself through the medium. So Then we go to the next topic, which is the evolution and finality of the soul. So here the final answer to what is the meaning of life, right? So what Denis says here that is that the soul contains in its natural state all the germs of its future development. So we have all the, the, the possibilities in ourselves of future development. So he says the aim of evolution, the reason for life and being, so the meaning of life is the perfection of each one of us. So that is our ultimate goal, right? To reach perfection. And then pain, physical or moral. So physical pain or moral pain forms our experience, Denis says, right? And what is the price of it? Is wisdom. And with each rebirth, the spirit must fashion a new envelope, a new body, which will serve as its dwelling, as its, let's say, the personal home, right? Our body, and express the conception of its character, because we express our character through our body. That's what he's saying here, right? So Kardec says the same, right? So in the question 132, he's asked to the spirits, what is the purpose of the incarnation of the spirits? And they answer, God imposes incarnation for the purpose of leading spirits to perfection. So the same that Denis said, right? So Kardec he asked also, is incarnation necessary for spirits who have followed the path of the good from the beginning? And the answer is all are created simple and ignorant, gaining instruction through the struggles and tribulations of a corporeal life. You see, pain, physical, moral, is the something that we have, but the wisdom of that, the price of that is wisdom. So it's perfection. So Kardec is the same, saying the same here. We are all created by God, simple and ignorant, but our main goal is to reach perfection. So that's the meaning of our life, right? And he also asked in question 166 now about reincarnation, right? How can a soul who did not reach perfection during its corporeal life complete the work of its purification? Because it's impossible for us to reach perfection in just one life, right? So that's the need of a reincarnation. And then the answer here, by submitting to the trial of a new existence. And then he asked, what is the purpose of a reincarnation? The answer is expiation and humankind's progressive improvement, the law of a progress, right? Expiation of our past wrongdoings, right? So the correction of a past wrongdoing, the repairment of that. So that is the purpose of reincarnation. And without the reincarnation, how could there be justice, right? Then this last expression here send us to the chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, right? Blessed are the afflicted, right? The justice of afflictions. So, and then going to the concluding remarks, just make a wrap up of what we saw today. Then he said that consciousness is one, but manifests itself in several ways. In a restricted way, in our normal life, our normal consciousness of our day-to-day activities, more complete, more broad, in a state of detachment or a state of emancipation, like of the soul, like Kardec says, and in a full, perfect way after death, right? At the time before death, because after death we are totally free from the body. Then there is no cord linking us to the body, right? And the examination of all the disclosed facts here that he put here proves that the exterior me or the superficial me and the me surviving death are identical. They are the same and represents two aspects of one and same existence, right? So what we are here, what we are today in our present life will be in after death, right? And we don't change by dying, right? We don't become more good or more or evil because we die. We are the same person. That's why it's important to look at how we live in our present life, because that will determine what our future life in the spiritual realm will be. So that's what Denis is saying here. And then just to finalize, he says there is in each of us a mysterious energy which pushes us toward the beautiful and the good. What is that? Is the law of progress. So one of the moral laws that which we can see in the third part of the book, Spiritist book, right? So law of progress, of eternal evolution. We will progress forever. Which and this law of progress guides humanity across the ages. And it is by the accord of the human and divine will that are built the works which prepare for the reign of God, the reign of justice, wisdom, and goodness. So when our will, our free will, are linked, they are directly linked to the God's will, which is always wants the good for everybody, everywhere, and then we can build in ourselves the reign of God, the reign of justice, wisdom, and goodness. So maybe we make all our efforts to reach such a divine purpose, which is the ultimate purpose of our life, the meaning of our life. So that's what I would like to bring us today regarding the life and destiny. And thanks for hearing. Thanks for the patience.
No, thank you so much for that very wonderful and very interesting talk. Because one thing is that obviously not everyone who speaks English may have had a chance to read this book yet, because not all the books have been available in all countries in English. But thank you. That's really good. And look, I just want to also say thank you to everyone who's watching, everyone who's given some comments. Normally, we always ask for people to let us know, who's watching, where you're watching from. And normally I only write down maybe 12 names, because that's all the names that come through. I've just written down so many names, which we're going to read out in just a moment. But before that, we're going to go to the announcements on behalf of BUS first. Let me just bring them up. So just a repeat again of this request to, if you can, please help the British Asian Trust and their Oxygen for India emergency appeal. As we know, like I said before at the start of the show, we know that people from around the world are being affected dramatically because of COVID. We know that in Brazil there has been a similar situation of a lack of oxygen. Right now in India it is a catastrophic amount. So please, whoever could help, go to www.britishasiantrust.org. There are obviously other organizations around the world doing the same kind of appeal, same kind of help. So please, think to see if you can help with these organizations. So on behalf of BUS, the following announcements. The 2021 European tour with Givaldo Franco will be taking place virtually again this year, starting on the 8th of May. So next Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Brasilia time, and then following on for each week after that. And those will be in Portuguese. And then from the 11th of May onwards, there will be the versions with the English subtitles. So please make sure that you tune in for those. The 8th British Congress on Medicine and Spirituality will be taking place on May 22nd. And this is organized by the British Spiritist Medical Association, the International Spiritist Medical Association, as well as the British Union of Spiritist Societies. So the topic is Health for the Third Millennium. They'll be online on May the 22nd. The weekly show, Spiritual Light, featuring Charles Kempf, Elsa Rossi, Nadja Gisses, and Stephen Batoza, will be moving from Thursdays to Wednesdays. And their next topic is the future of humanity. Very interesting. And just a reminder, we mentioned this the other day in our other live regarding the Medium's book, that Reborn for Love and also Elsa Ross's book, The Orchard House, are now available on Amazon Kindle. So these are published by Bus and available on Amazon Kindle. So please go out and buy these wonderful books. The next Léon Denis talk will be with Munir Gariba on the 6th of June, who will be continuing to talk about the problem of life and destiny. Our good friends, the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth, in conjunction with the Pooled Christian Spiritualist Church, will be obviously continuing with their regular talks about the psychological series of books from the Spirit Joanna de Angelis. Now, the next talk has been moved. It's now moved to the 14th of May. And I'm just sorry, I've just lost the name. The person who will be talking is Julio Carvalho from America. So that's now on the 14th of May. But otherwise, it is every other week going on from that. Insightfully Speaking, a wonderful podcast from Kardec Group. Episode 3 is going to be coming out very soon, and you will be able to find that on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Deezer. And please go and follow Kardec Group, so at Kardec Group, on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter to find out more details about that and when it's released. And of course, if you want to contact Bus at any time, you can do so via these details: www.bus.org.uk. You can email office@bus.org.uk. You can visit via, that's missing the symbols, Facebook at uk.bus, and YouTube is Bus Audio Visuals. But you should know that because you're already watching via the Bus channels right now. And again, just to repeat, please, 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 if you can, please consider this wonderful campaign to help our friends in need in India. Okay, so let's go and see, let's go and say hello to all the people who have been watching. So, oh gosh, this may take a while. Let's say hello to Jason, Maria Fatima, Charles Kempf, Nonna, Regina Munir, Munir, who'll be with us next time, Jacqueline, Sandra, Elsa Rossi, Luciana, Valeria, Celia, Fabrizio from Bournemouth, Marcelo, Gisela, Dircy, Frederico, Chiago, Clarice, and there's another Clarice as well, Sidelio, Antonio, there's actually 3 Antonios watching, Teresa, Maristella, Ed Cheech, Valkyria, Wilma, Vera, Abadi, Steven from Ireland, Maria Eugenia, Hosanna, Jania, Eliani, Edgier, our good friend Edgier Pachon, Maria de Lourdes, Fernanda, Christiani, Jose, Louisa, Hejani, Anna Maria, Sheila, Meiko, Nisi, Leila, Mirna, and Mateus. I've not had such a large list of names to read out on these events. So welcome and thank you for everyone for being with us. And thank you to all our friends who are obviously watching from Sao Paulo as well. Got some great comments coming in Portuguese. So thank you for all of those. Now, we have asked people to send their questions through, and we do have a couple of questions that we can try to bring up. So we have, if I can find it just very quickly. Here we go. We have a question from Jacqueline. How can you differentiate somnambulism from spiritual unfoldment, as both are kind of emancipation of the soul?
And she asked in Portuguese also. Sonambulismo de desdobramento. We can say that the spiritual unfoldment, which Kardec mentioned as emancipation of the soul, this is the broad phenomena, right? So, and there is some kind of unfoldment. One is, for example, sleep. Another is sonambulism. For sonambulism, in when the soul is detached from the body and he controls the body. And Denis says in his book, for example, you say sometimes the person he not wakes up in the morning, but he come out from his bed and he, for example, climb the roof of a house and walks on the roof in a very dangerous situation, but nothing happened to him. So and he's sleeping. So what happened that way? This is a classic example of sonambulism. Or in this case, what happens? The soul is separate. Let's say is detached from the body, but he through that cord, that etheric cord that I mentioned, he controls his own body. So so the person in his body, he has no conscience, but the soul has a conscience, and he's controlling his body. That's why he knows he's in that. Even in that dangerous situation, the person goes through that walking and returns safe to his bed, and then he wake up. So sleep in one example of spiritual unfoldment or emancipation. Sonambulism in another. Catalepsy is another, when part of our body is in kind of a we lose the sensation, right, of a part of our body. Lethargy is when the whole body is we lose sensation of a whole body. Lethargy is another example of spiritual unfoldment, and also ecstasies, right? When the soul goes to so elevate the level and sees some marvelous things that always the soul does not want to return to the body. So this is the ecstasy, right? So these are all examples, but all the medium states, right? When a medium, for example, have a second sight, for example, when the medium see the spirits, he's not seeing with his naked eyes, he's seeing with his spiritual body. And for to see with the spiritual body, it must detach, let's say, part of this perispirit, and then he can see the spirit, right? So all the incorporation, material effects, everything is an example of a spiritual unfoldment, like Jacqueline says, right? So that is the difference. So Sonambulism is just one type.
Yeah, and of course, mentioning about the perispirit, and no, it's not necessary. Sorry, because in Brazil, there's the expression "nada por acaso," nothing,
Another,
nothing by chance.
yeah.
That actually this morning, the group that I work with my wonderful wife Valeria, who's watching with us, we actually studied question 93 this morning. So,
Oh,
so there we go.
that's
Great
wonderful.
minds think alike.
Mm,
And of course, question 919 that you mentioned. I think
mm,
that's probably the most famous one being talked about
mm,
this past year. Know thyself. Know
mm.
thyself.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, exactly. Somnambulism, this emancipation of the soul, this ability for us to detach that bit, to have these wonderful experiences. Um, we are coming out of time a little bit. We have a few more questions. Let's go to Elza Rossi, who has asked, and I cannot find it, I'm sorry. She's basically asking, are our dreams like an escape valve? So where
An
we have the
escape
escape
valve.
valve on like a pressure cooker or on a tire to be able to let things go.
Hmm. In some way, yes, Adam, because we see in our day-to-day life, on our, let's say, normal life, like Denise said, there is many things that we hide, right? We don't want to show our bad parts. We don't want to show our good parts. We want to know what we know. We don't want to know what we ignore. And then we have lot of controls in our behavior, and then when we are in the state of this emancipation of the soul is free, is more free. So in that situation, we don't have all these constraints, right, of our social life or whatever. So there we are more free, and then we can express ourselves in a more honest way. Let's put it that way, right? So in that sense, yes, yeah,
Yeah, but all the masks come away
yeah, yeah,
when we're in that way.
yeah.
And we'll go to just one last question, which is from Eliani. And here it is. So, there's no standard formula to dreams. They are only they're only understandable. So, to that specific for that specific person,
Mm,
how can we understand our dreams better?
mm. Yeah, it's difficult to understand the dream because, like I mentioned, right? Denis also mentioned that we just remind some fragments of what happened during when we are sleeping. Because what happened it was not in with our physical body. Our physical body was there, sleeping in the bed on the bed, right? But so was the soul with his spiritual body who was acting, was talking, was thinking on during the night. And then that's why we only remember fragments. But so we have also this situation where since the ancient times people try to interpret the dream, right? So well, Freud that I mentioned wrote a famous book about the interpretation of dreams, where he says that dreams actually are the realization of our desires. That's what he said, right? So, and those desires come from our unconscious, and so those desires, like I just said now, those desires some are forbidden. So we try to hide in him, and then on dreams they emerge. So that's also answered Elsa's question, right? So interpretation of a dream is very difficult because we can have a direct explanation, right? And then we have those three types of dreams that I mentioned. The superficial dreams, which when we dream as uh, concerning something that were preoccupying us during the day. We have the reflective dreams when we have some partial view of our past life, and the real dreams when we find the person incarnate or discarnated and talk to them and so on. What I should say that instead of trying to interpret our dreams or understand the dreams, and what is most important, and Kardec talks about that in the Spirit book, is to follow our intuition, our it's not instinct, it's intuition, our intuition. He said that we have our tendencies. So, and what is important that happened during the night, we will remind during the day as tendencies, as intuitions, and if that is a good things, we can follow it. So, it, that's what I could say. Instead of trying to interpret it, just follow what you feel. But of course, you judge if you are feeling is good or not, right? Because if you're not good, you just put aside, right? So that's what I could say. In my for example, it's a kind of personal situation, right? But in my situation, for example, it's common to me to go to sleep with some problem and problem from the Spiritist São Paulo FESP, Spiritist Federation, State of São Paulo Spiritist Federation. As a president, I have a lot of problems of things to resolve, and then, well, how can I go to resolve this? And then in the morning, I wake up with an idea, a clear idea of what I should do. So what happened during the night? Probably we go to a meeting with the spiritists, who really commanded our spirit, our home, our spiritual home. And then I got some advice, and then the next morning I have this idea. So I don't remember where I meeting, who I finding, what I talked, what they talked to me, but I have the idea. So that's what I would recommend our colleague here, right, to follow.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, there's a question that's just come in. This will be the last question, so thank you for everyone who has asked it. And this is from Rihanna in South Africa. Do our dreams warn us of things? So follows on quite well to what you're talking about. So in the Bible, it says God comes to us and through our dreams to warn us.
Yes, it's like that case, right? I mentioned here that the need brought to us the premonitory dreams, right? So that example of the child who saw his father's car accident where the father was killed and so on. So in the same way that that child could foresee what would happen to his father, we also may have a situation during the night when we have some advice, right? Because, and that's something important. The question is very good because it is very important for us to prepare to sleep, right? So just praying before sleep, avoid looking to violent movies, for example. That's very important because in the mental mood, let's say, that we go to sleep, we determine what we will do during the night, right? In that state of emancipation. And then in those cases, sometimes when we have something that it could be something threatened, a threat to us, we can receive some advice because we have we say in Spiritism, we all have our protectors, right? The spiritual protectors who guide us. Who is the guard angels, and we say in Catholicism, right? And then we have that, and they advise. They are always trying to advise us about what's dangerous to us, what we should not do. Socrates, for example, had this kind of he said a diamond, right? He said a genius who advises him when he should not do something. So they are always trying to help us, and so that can we can have that as a warning, like our colleague is saying here, right? So yes, the answer is yes. Dreams of can bring us good warnings, and we should be alert to that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Roberto, we've come to the end of this event. So thank you so much for your explanations, for answering all these questions, for the wonderful presentation that you've given us. There's so much more that we could be talking about, but look, we've been talking for over almost an hour and a half already. So, and I'm sure that some people may have other things that they might need to be doing today, but this was absolutely fantastic. You talked about all these things about the dreams, about reincarnation is important for our future development. Without reincarnation, how can there be any justice? What's the purpose of reincarnation? And the law of progress, this affinity, everything that pulls us towards the goals that we have in this life, in this incarnation. So again, just thank you so much for bringing all this wonderful knowledge to us.
Well, I thank you for this opportunity to be with you all. And excuse me for the long presentation. And thank you.
Thank you. So we just want to bring up this appeal once more. If you are able to donate, please go to www.britishasiantrust.org. They are collecting money on behalf of this Oxygen for India emergency appeal. This is direct with the British Asian Trust. They are working in partnership with organizations in India to be able to help get them the oxygen that they need to help during this horrible COVID pandemic, this intense situation that they're going through there. Well, friends, that's all we have time for now. So again, just leaves me to thank our friend Roberto once more for being with us. Thank you, Bus, for organising this event. Thank you, the Irish Spiritist Federation, and Kardec Radio and Kardec Group for transmitting the event. Thank you, all of you who've been out with us today, for everyone who sent a hello, for everyone who sent their questions. Now, we will be back again next time on the 6th of June with Munir Gariba, who'll be continuing to talk about the problem of life and destiny. So thank you, keep safe, and we hope to see you again very soon.